Okay.
MK Ultra was a series of experiments to see whether or not psychedelics would give us an advantage in some sort of intelligence gathering operation. That was what MK Ultra was all about.
Wasn't it? Tell me if I'm wrong here. That's what I heard, that they use it on spies actually to help create double personalities.
So they experimented with a lot of different things, and this is so interesting because one of the things that people don't understand is that when you are in a national security role, everything takes second place to pursuing national security. So your personal health takes a back seat to national security. Your family takes a back seat to national security. The values that you have of treating people as equals takes a back seat to national security. National security has to come first. We call it service before self, right? So when you think about something like MK Ultra, why was it that we were experimenting with psychedelics at all? Because our opponents were also. The Russians were experimenting with psychedelics. The Soviets were seeing whether or not they could get an advantage, maximize their national security, and gain an advantage over the United States by tapping into unmeasured or unknown theoretical powers that exist in the mind for their spies, but also whether or not they could find the right recipe by testing on prisoners or testing on, political opposition or whatever else it might be. Because of Russia, because of the Soviet Union's lack of human rights, they had this giant pool of people they could test on. Here in the United States, we had law and order, and we had a semblance of human rights. So we couldn't just grab anybody and test them. We had to find a legal process by which we could get a prisoner to say yes or grant them an extension to their parole or whatever else, as well as find volunteers. So that's the difference between the two. Same thing happened in World War II. Why did we start developing a nuclear bomb? Because the Germans were developing a nuclear bomb, right? Why were American dollars being spent to find historic artifacts that might give some sort of advantage because you have the Holy Grail? Because the Nazis were trying to get an advantage doing that. It's something we call the security paradox.
Yeah.
Where for me, if I put an alarm system on my house, guess what you're going to put on your house? If I get a guard dog, guess what you're going to feel the pressure to do, right? If I get a guard dog that weighs 60 pounds, you're probably going to get a guard dog that weighs 80 pounds, right? If I get a handgun, you're probably going to get a bigger caliber handgun. This is the United States. It's a security paradox.
Yeah. Can we talk about some conspiracies? I don't know where it's going to go, but I'm curious to just bring the conversation because I know if I'm a conspiracy lover, other people are as well.
Absolutely.
So down the whole line of, so there's been, especially growing up in Australia, right? So I don't know what it's really like here. Like I said, I'd like to stay quite objective with things, but because Australians, we stay quite, we've never had threats really. I mean, I think Darwin got bombed, the top of Australia back in, I think, World War II. Apart from that, we just get left alone. We surf and we hang out and we go to the bar. And so when we look at and we hear about, all the conspiracies, there's things like the JFK assassination, and then there's the thing of going, well, the CIA did it. Can we start with that? And I don't know if you're allowed to talk about it or I don't know what, but I'd like to just sort of hear your perspective on that whole conversation, because if you talk to the conspiracy theorists, they're like, the CIA did it.
So two things that are important for this conversation. First is understanding that Australian culture as it relates to the society's view of the government is very different than the American culture of how society views the government. So for example, everybody knows that CIA is America's secret intelligence service. Very few people know that Australia even has
I had no idea.
a secret intelligence service, let alone a very effective secret intelligence service, right? So right there, you got two major cultural differences. So when your whole society already knows you have an effective secret intelligence service, they already don't trust you. That's the first thing. You have secrets. You know how to keep your secrets. Therefore, you must be keeping secrets from me. That's the logical way of thinking. So every American forever has always been the government has secrets they're keeping from me because they're so good at it. In Australia, guess what? The government has secrets they're keeping from you because they're so good at it. The difference is you don't even fucking know that they're that good at keeping secrets, right? It's a big difference that helps you understand why conspiracies are rampant in the United States and not so rampant in Australia.
Do you think they have any type of ground to believe the things they believe?
Absolutely. And conspiracies are important to understand because they're predictable. There's what we call an anatomy to the conspiracy. Conspiracies all start because something factual happened, right? So think of 9/11 and the 9/11 conspiracies. 9/11 really happened. JFK assassination. JFK was assassinated. Like, these are real things that actually happened. That's the start of a conspiracy. And then immediately after the true event, there is a lack of information. So there has to be a real event and then a lack of information. The third step is something that we call speculation. Now, speculation and suspicion are cousins of each other. Suspicion is healthy, right? It's good to be suspicious. It's good to question. Like, there's such a thing as healthy suspicion. But speculation is a very different thing. Speculation is when you start to assume that you know what the answer is to the question that you don't know. Well, immediately on the back end of speculation, somebody creates a story that closes the open loop so that there's a convenient explanation for why this real event happened that you're not allowed to know, that you don't really trust, and then here's a convenient explanation, a story.
It probably help people be able to, because there's like a bit of cognitive dissonance that happens, right? Some crazy thing like 9/11, like the fuck, and then jumping to the first thing that happens that, I don't know, people are interesting.
Yeah, and people don't like cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Cognitive dissonance is like having a thorn in your sock. You don't like it, so you want to fix it.
Yeah.
Right? The problem is that when it comes to conspiracies, you can't just take the thorn out. Like, you don't know what actually happened in certain details. We don't know who actually shot JFK. We don't know what made the different towers fall on 9/11. Like, there's some secrets that we're not allowed to know. Well, then we start leaping to these conclusions like, oh, it was an inside job, or oh, it was CIA, or oh, it was whatever, because these are secret organizations and just they can't be trusted because they keep secrets. Well, guess what? You keep secrets too.
Yeah.
Right? We all live in this strange world where somehow we expect that we're allowed to keep our secrets, but it's unreasonable that other people keep their secrets too. So we should have all secrets shared with us, but we're allowed to keep our secrets to ourselves. Otherwise, we suspect the other person. It's totally irrational.
So there's a thing that I do when I'm in some conversations. Like, for example, if I got to fire somebody, situations like this, like hard conversations, if I know I'm bringing you into like it's just harder to talk with somebody, right? I struggle, and it's funny because I know a lot about self-regulating and all these sorts of things, but there's still one thing that I can't shake, and I'd love to know how you deal with it, is hard conversations specifically, or just things I'm uncomfortable with. My whole body will change. I talk down here, like I talk in my voice here, because I just can't speak it out. I can get more shaky, I can really feel like the nerves come over. And even sometimes, like when I've interviewed some really big guests, even just like you meet someone who's like, oh my God, you're huge. Just like being able to really contain that and just be a normal freaking person. How do we sort of do that? How can we better just stay nice and calm and regulated when we have to have maybe hard conversations or nervous conversations and things like this?
So there's a process called stress inoculation. Have you heard of stress inoculation?
No.
So stress inoculation is just like being inoculated against a virus. It means that you have to replicate the stress that you're going to feel for this event. You have to replicate that through a scenario so that your body can physiologically adapt to the stress that you're going to experience.
You do it before?
So you role play or you practice it before. So here's what we do at CIA. When we know that we're getting ready for a high stakes operation, or we know that we're getting ready to meet with some massively either important, wealthy, or dangerous person, we will role play multiple times. There's something called a safe house. There are safe houses for our special operators that exist, where a special ops team getting ready for an op, they will all go to a safe house. They'll shut the door and they'll lock themselves in for anywhere from 3 to 7 days. And all they do is practice in this there's a big sandbox in the middle of the house. They'll just practice over and over again what the operation is going to be. right? You know, Delta team's going to go here and Bravo team's going to go here. And then at a 0800, we're going to assault the 2 doors from this end. And then after they've practiced it once, they wipe the sand clean and they do it again. And they wipe the sand clean and they do it again. And they try every different angle until they find the right angle, and they just repeat it over and over again. They're inoculating themselves about the stress of movement while also building a pattern of behavior, muscle memory about how they're going to execute. We do the same thing before we have any kind of high-risk conversation with a terrorist or with a child trafficker or with a drug dealer, right? You find a peer and you say, hey, I need you to sit in the shoes of XYZ terrorist, and I'm going to ask you questions, and I need you to respond like the terrorist would respond, right? And now all of a sudden I'm not sitting here with Morgan, I'm sitting here with, you name the bad guy, and I make it feel real to me. And then you make it feel real to me as well. So when I say like, hey, where's the bomb hidden? And then you tell me there's no bomb. I'm like, I got to find a way to get through this. I got to practice this. I got to inoculate this. So if you want to fire somebody, don't fucking fire them the first time that you walk in and sit with them to fire them. Fire them 15 times before that by talking to, a senior manager, or talking to somebody else in your company, or talking to your spouse, or talking to your best friend, and be like, hey dude, help me here. I got to fire a guy. He's been here for 15 years. He's kind of old and persnickety. So I just need you to be that guy. And I'm going to have a conversation with you, and I'm going to fire you. And you're going to find out quickly what words roll out nicely, what words don't roll out so nicely. And then by the time you actually sit with the person, you've already fired him 15 times.
Yeah.
You have information superiority, just like I told you earlier on, right? It's all about having more information than the other person. You're more in tune with how your body's going to react, and your body is actually inoculated against the stress of firing him, because your body's point of view is you've already fired them 15 times.
Just building the familiarity in your nervous system, I guess.
Right. That you're inoculating against, technically what you're doing is inoculating against the cortisol spike that happens when you put yourself in an uncomfortable situation.
How do we stop these things being used on us? So like with the rice method, I know, you can coerce people with guilt, things like this, because, one of my highest values is love. And that's why I don't like firing people, because I'm like, this is fucking hard for me, because like I genuinely just care about you as a human. It's very hard. And there's definitely been times in my life where I haven't made the best decision because I felt bad about what I was doing or something, right? So how can we, I guess, like mask or our feelings almost? How do you defend yourself in case of, what if you're up against another spy and they're trying to do things to you? How do we control that?
So you're actually asking 2 different questions. Your first question is, how do we stop someone else from using them against us? You can't. If somebody is skilled or trained, or maybe just natural, they'll learn to use these techniques on you. You can't stop them from using them. But what you can do is be aware of when the technique is being used on you, which is very similar to your second question, right? What can I do to mask against my natural response or instinct? When you are aware of what techniques are being used on you, it's very similar to being aware of what your natural response is. We say that everything starts with awareness. So if you already know that something is going to be hard, I mean, it makes sense now why you're so like concerned about giving somebody bad news. If you come from a place of love, and you're wired for love, and you're wired for like making people happy, and you're wired for finding like the peaceful resolution, that means every time conflict is guaranteed, it's amplified, because you already don't want to do it. You already know you don't want to do it. And for the last 25 years, you haven't wanted to do it. And now you got to do it. So it gets amplified. When you're aware of what's happening, that's the first step. And then once you're aware of something, then you can start to take proactive action to prepare against it, like inoculating through stress, or inoculating through practice, or repetition, or outsourcing. Maybe you don't have to be the one that fires them. Maybe you can have somebody else fire them, right? Or maybe you can have somebody else breaks the bad news, so you don't have to. But it all comes from awareness. When you see somebody tapping into your guilt, or tapping into your fear, or tapping into your sense of self-consciousness, right? When you're aware of it, you're already better prepared than the person who's totally unaware of their response or how they're going to feel. And going back to that idea of who knows more, who has more information, awareness is a big piece of information. Oftentimes the person who's talking to you and trying to manipulate you or trying to make you feel guilty, they're not even aware that they're doing it. So that means you're more aware than they are. You have more information than they do. You already have the advantage.
How do you make sure that your cognitive biases aren't disturbing your judgment? Like, let's say you're assessing me before. How do you make sure that you're not looking for confirmation bias or recency bias and skewing your judgment, completely fucking something up?
This question it totally relates to your previous question, right? Cognitive bias is so dangerous because people are not aware that they have them.
Yeah.
And then confirmation bias is also equally dangerous because people don't realize, they're not aware that that's what they're doing, right? So first, being aware of the fact that you have biases at all is an important thing. Here's what's tricky about biases, right? Biases are very hard to see in the future, but they're very easy to see upon reflection.
Yes.
So you can reflect back and be like, oh, I've got a bias for XYZ, right? Like I have an inherent bias for funny brunettes. Like a funny brunette can get away with murder with me because it's my mom was a funny brunette. My wife is a funny brunette. Like I've always thought funny brunettes were safe. So like if someone's a scam, like the scam artist I'm the most afraid of is the funny brunette. Where, a funny blonde doesn't really, I'm not inherently biased in a way that I'm vulnerable to a funny blonde.
So becoming aware of what you're already naturally biased to.
Correct. Because then you can see it in the future when you have reflected upon it in the past.
And what about collecting evidence? So this is also a reason why I try not to hire people, because I'm trained to see people's potential. People come to my room and they're like, oh, I'm all fucked up. I have self-doubt. I'm like, I see through their shit to be like, find that potential. So I've hired the wrong people because I'm like, they're so amazing. And then my team be like, the fuck do you hire this person for? They're an idiot. I'm like, yeah, but they're just so beautiful. I'm like, I can't hire. I don't like to do at least the first interview. They go now through a series of my team, and I'll do the final one. And I'll look for like a lot of different, like I'll look for personality traits and I psychoanalyze the shit out of them, see what their natural traits are like. And then if I like it, it's good. But like, is there a way to sort of avoid that? Like naturally, like if I'm talking to someone, I'm picking up, like, let's say what you were saying to me before, oh, he's someone who likes shortcuts. How do you avoid to continually keep finding more evidence like that? Because it might not be true.
So you're doing it yourself, right? You can't, unfortunately, what we all have to understand is you can't overcome a cognitive bias.
Yeah.
It is a cognitive bias. A cognitive bias by definition is a process that your brain finds that it's a natural shortcut for effort, because your brain doesn't like to do effort. Like you said, I'm inherently lazy. We're all inherently lazy. And our brain is the laziest part of our body because our brain constantly wants to conserve processing power, energy. Like it's just what the brain does. It's a survival instinct. So once I have a cognitive bias for funny blondes, or once a Christian has a cognitive bias for the ideology of Christianity, it doesn't ever go away. My mom is a fantastic example of this. My mom was raised in a Catholic church. Then she rejected the Catholic church when she was like 18. Now she's like 60 something. And guess what she still does? She acts like a Catholic, even though she rejects the Catholic church. Like she'll talk smack about Catholics all day long, but then still practice Catholic cultural habits, right? Like Easter church on Easter service on Easter, right? Silly stuff. We've all seen it happen before. So you can't fix a cognitive bias. All you can do is become aware of it and then put practices in place that reduce the likelihood of you falling into your bias, which is why you have your whole team do pre-interviews before you ever interview it. I would actually recommend you go a step further and actually automate an assessment, like automate a challenge, so that anybody, before they even get the first personal interview, has to go through an empirical challenge that then gives an empirical score to their success of the challenge before anybody even talks to them.
Yeah.
Because then you take away human bias altogether.
Yeah.